Well, Tennessee might have a couple problems. They also might not.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your number one source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, where you can get a big return. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. National title contenders didn't all play well this week, I have thoughts. Some of them did, but others not so much. And boy, that hunt for the G5 playoff spot's getting spicy. It's getting spicier every week. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC, joining me here. We'll start with the Vols, and then we'll get to the chaos in the SEC. So I don't feel any different about Tennessee after the Georgia game, Chris. Yeah, I thought if Nico played, they'd covered 9.5. But I mean, they're one goal line stand away from doing that. Like, I look at Tennessee the exact same way. And I don't think they've got problems on the field, unless you thought they had problems before, which you can certainly argue. But the reason I kind of wonder, like, is Tennessee really in a bad spot here? They've got a cupcake and they've got Vanderbilt. And if they do that, I think they're into the playoffs. So I think Tennessee's kind of fine.
Yeah, if we've learned anything this year in the SEC, it's that winning on the road is hard. And, I mean, for the most part, home teams in ranked-on-ranked matchups have held serve. I mean, we can count on one hand the upsets that have happened. Georgia winning on the road at Texas, Alabama beating LSU in Baton Rouge, which they were favored, by the way. But, like, in terms of, like, road teams winning in the SEC and ranked-on-ranked matchups, it hasn't happened a whole lot this year. The home teams have held serve more often than not, and that's what this game was. Kirby Smart said it last week. He said, thank God we're finally at home, because they had to go play on the road at Bama, where they lost. They had to play on the road at Ole Miss, where they lost. I mean, all these tough road environments. Georgia finally got one at home, and it favored them, and they were able to pull off a win against Tennessee. If this game had been played in Neyland, I think Tennessee maybe has a chance. Their defense played as good as can be expected. The good thing for Georgia was...
I don't know about that. That Georgia offense, Chris, had been really bad, and all of a sudden Carson Beck looked like a top 5 NFL draft pick again.
No, I get it, and most of that came, in the second half. I mean, look, they got shut out in the first quarter. They looked like a jumbled mess again. Tennessee jumped out to a 10-0 lead. Yeah, they had some breakdowns in the secondary in the second half, and Carson Beck started connecting and all that. They still couldn't run the football. I mean, Nate Frazier was okay. When they said Trevor Etienne was out, I was like, wow, that's okay. Now it's all on Carson Beck. And to his credit, for his first game in about 6 weeks, he finally had a game where he didn't throw an interception. So again, they did what they needed to do, but I still feel like if this game had been played in Neyland, and remember, Nico Iamaleava was not 100% in this one. He was playing through injury and he battled, but to me, it was more, this has been the story of the Tennessee-Georgia rivalry since Josh Heupel's been there. His high-flying offense scores 40 points a game against everybody else, but in this matchup, it gets bogged down, and we saw that once again.
Yeah, I think Kirby Smart said the right things to his team before this game. I know they got down 10-0, but I'm pretty sure that's why they play 4 quarters of football, and by the end, I thought, yeah, Georgia's a better team today. And with regards to the Vols, before we get to the off-season implications here, Chris, what do you make of Tennessee on the field? Because I see so much potential. Nico's got a big arm. Nico can run. But the passing game, it's not there consistently. And Dylan Sampson is great. Love the story they did about him on College Game Day. Thought that was phenomenal. And the Game Day crew crushed it as per our usual arrangement here. But they ran the ball fine. But they didn't throw it very well, under 200 yards through the air. Again, for Nico, that's been a pretty common occurrence. Their defense was really good. I don't write off their defense because they had one game where they allowed 31 points. And to your point, I think they played better than the 31 points really indicated there. But where do you think the Vols can go with what you have seen on the field from them so far?
Well, look, the good news is the season's not over. I mean, they're going to play UTEP this week. Then they're going to go on the road at Vandy, which isn't a give me. I know Vandy's been
No, it is not.
Vandy's been scrappy, but if they can win those two and finish 10-2, they're going to be in the conversation. Now, I know some people are already saying, oh, well, if it's Bama or it's Ole Miss or it's, all these other teams will be in ahead of them. Look, all you got to do is just take care of your business. Win the next two. Let out all the, dominoes fall and pieces fall into place after this. Somebody else is going to lose. Somebody's going to get upset. and this thing will figure itself out. But I do think we got to look back early in the season at what Tennessee did. I mean, they come out of the gate swinging. I bet, I get it was Chattanooga, but then NC State was the top 25 team. Turned out to be not that good, but they beat the hell out of them. They beat Oklahoma on the road. I mean, they had a nice start to the year, and I do think, that resume win, home win over Alabama is one we shouldn't just poo-poo and discount. That was a great win, and to me, Tennessee should deserve to be in the final 12 teams. We'll see if that ends up happening. But on a side note, Spencer, God, the future looks bright for the SEC. And some of these stars, Nico Iamaleava is a redshirt freshman. I think he's only going to get better next year in the Heupel system. Lenore Sellers at South Carolina, a redshirt freshman. I mean, there's some dudes that you start to look next year or maybe even the year after and say, God, Arch Manning coming on as a starter next year for Texas. Like, there's going to be some really good SEC quarterback play in the SEC moving forward.
Yeah, I think the league has been really strong with their signal callers this year. And looking for it, yeah, you're going to lose a couple of guys, but who knows what that crazy transfer portal is going to churn out, or how the high school recruiting battles go. Heck, Juju Lewis decommitted from USC. USC flipped another quarterback in the 25 class. Maybe Juju goes to Colorado, but Auburn's pushed for him as well. I don't know. Auburn could
look at LSU. If they get Bryce Underwood, I mean, who knows? He could be starting next year.
Yeah, Auburn could certainly use a quarterback, though. But I want to talk about the craziness that is the SEC, because there's a world, Chris, a beautiful, chaotic, just poetically great world in which the SEC has, I don't know, everyone at 10-2. I remember when I was talking about teams before the season, one comment in particular, after I'd done several shows, and I had predicted a number of teams to go 10-2. And the comment read something to the effect of, I guess everyone's just going to go 10-2. Haha, that's not going to happen. Well, here we are, Chris, and everyone looks like they're going 10-2. I mean, if they can get by Kentucky this week, they'll set up a battle at Texas A&M last week of the regular season. What is happening here? Like, how does this play out? Who gets into the playoff? Because here's what I think people have to be prepared for, to be sure. A 3-loss SEC team is likely to make the playoff because there is no way, and I mean no way, the committee is going to punish the SEC championship game loser. And right now, it is more likely than not that the loser of the SEC title game will have 3 losses.
Yeah, you say there's no way they get left out. I mean, they just did it to Georgia last year. Georgia was undefeated, lost in the SEC title game, and they dropped them out of the top 4. So to me, don't say
right out of the top 4, not out of the top 12.
Well, but you're saying if they're all 10-2, the loser of the SEC championship, that's probably going to be their 3rd loss. What do you do when you got 3 or 4 other SEC teams sitting there at 10-2? They're more attractive than the team that just took a 3rd loss. And so I don't think it's a lock that the loser of the SEC championship is automatically into the playoff. The crazy thing is, and this is what blows my mind, the whole idea is to get the best 12 teams, right? Or the top 12 teams. The committee does a top 25 reveal ranking every week. At the end of the year, they rank 1 through 25, right? So 1 through 12 should get in. No, not so fast, because the latest projections have Tennessee as the 11th team, but outside looking in because of the stupid rewarding the top power, non-power 4 team.
Auto bids. Who doesn't love an auto? Are you telling me you don't love the auto bids down there in SEC country, Chris?
There will not be any auto bid that makes it to the final 4 of this playoff, because you know what? You have to have depth. Everybody can get lucky. Look, occasionally the Boise State can pull off the miracle against Oklahoma. That's awesome. That's great. That's what makes college football awesome. But in this playoff, you got to win multiple of those games, and you got to have depth. You got to be conditioned, and that's where I think teams like Georgia, Alabama, you will see the depth on those rosters sustain, and they'll make deep runs in this playoff. Boise State, awesome year. Ashton Jeanty, great year. I don't think a Boise can win multiple games in a playoff and go play for a championship. It's just not.
No, I don't either. And I mean, Boise, I'm talking about them more a little bit later on. But really quick to wrap this thought, Chris, if everyone is 10-2, should everyone just ignore the tiebreakers and say, you know what, let the conference people figure out and just tell me who's in the game? Or should there be things that people watch for of like, oh, what if this team beats this team? And because you could literally look up and have, I think it's 6 SEC teams that end the year 10-2. 6.
Well, I think the real conversation should come back to bringing back the East versus West in the SEC, because the best part about divisions, well, hear me out. The best part about divisions is at least you play head to head. The toughest conversation we're having right now is not every schedule is equal. People are having that conversation about Indiana right now saying, well, they have no top 25 wins. How good are they? We don't know. The same argument can be made about Texas right now. Texas has been awesome, but you know what? They haven't played any of like the top 6 of the top 7 teams in the SEC. They've avoided this year because they're not on their schedule. They played Georgia, and they got their butts beat. But there's no in that,
I see the problem. I don't know that divisions are necessarily the solution, because divisions introduce another problem, which is, hey, this team wins its division, goes to the championship game. Like, it's the Big Ten conundrum, where it's like, hey, Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan are on the same side, and they're going to play Iowa, Northwestern, or Purdue every year.
But the one thing head-to-head takes care, or the division takes care of, is head-to-head. If you're on the West and you beat everybody in the West, you're in. In this scenario, we're getting into, well, Tennessee beat Alabama, but they lost to Georgia. But Georgia lost to Alabama. It's like this weird circle we're going in. We're like, who has the edge? Nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows. We're just going to wait and find out. Let the chaos unfold. Chris Gordy, Locked On SEC. Chris, appreciate it as always.
Thanks, man.
A lot of national title contenders in the SEC. Plenty elsewhere. They didn't all look great over the weekend. Who's got more problems after this past Saturday that was this close to being volcanic for a couple of teams? That's coming up next. First, let's talk about 5 Hour Energy. I am tired all the time this time of year. I am incredibly busy. I've got 2.5 different jobs and a bunch of things and trying to work in my own free time and whatnot. And guess what? 5 Hour Energy keeps me going, and it'll keep you going as well. It takes a lot of energy to power through the day, especially as a college football fan, but 5 Hour Energy will help you with last-second touchdowns, agonizing overtimes, anything you want. They will keep you charged up. 5 Hour Energy knows no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and yeah, a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for the big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always a mile long. That's why the limited edition Stan the Fan 5 Hour Energy shot is here to help keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. And trust me, if you need a boost, whether you're a big fan or an average fan or the ultimate most diehard fan imaginable, guess what? 5 Hour Energy is going to keep you boosted all day long for, 5 hours, of course, hence the name. On 5hourenergy.com, that's where you can get it. 5hourenergy.com, ship nationwide. Go get your order today. So Texas is a national championship contender, right? Well, that's certainly how it looks. And people are questioning their resume after their 20-10 win at Arkansas this past week. I'm not. They had a bad day against Georgia. Okay, Georgia's a team that can win the national championship. So you weren't quite up to par. Only lost by 15 points after getting down big at the half and staged a comeback a little bit. But again, didn't have a great day. Happened to come against Georgia earlier this year. And then people will couple that performance with this performance against Arkansas and say, oh man, look how hard it was to put away Arkansas. I mean, they had the lead early and then they just couldn't put them away and it was 20-10 and whatnot. I've got no vibe on Texas here. I haven't shifted my perception of the Longhorns because I thought Arkansas would cover and Texas would win. So exactly what I thought would play out, played out in Fayetteville on Saturday, early afternoon, late morning, depending on which part of the country you are watching this football game from. But Quinn Ewers is good. And then there's Quinn Ewers and he's not as good. And he kind of goes back and forth. But guess what? He's been the same guy the entire time that he has been Texas' starting quarterback. He really hasn't changed that much. Sure, you could say he's a little better now than he used to be, but he's always had ebbs and flows. The offense has always had good halves and really, really bad ones where they go dormant. That's been Texas the whole time. And last year, they were in the college football playoff semifinal. And they were one play away from getting to play for a national championship. Yeah, they probably would have lost to Michigan, but guess what? They were still at that level. So if you look at Quinn Ewers or the Texas offense and say, oh my gosh, there's only 20 points. Yeah, the Arkansas defense isn't very good. You should have been able to put up more than 20. But I don't expect you to play your best football every single week. And when you are on the road against an Arkansas team that I don't think is bad, I think is pretty darn solid. I've watched Arkansas a good amount this year. They're not a great football team. They're not a bad one either. You give me a road environment like that, late in the season, guys can be dinged up a little bit. It's hard. It's a long season. This is the grinding month of November, and Texas went in there and grinded out a win. So I don't downgrade Texas in terms of how I view them compared to everybody else and other national title contenders because they went out there and won a game 20-10. It wasn't as bad as Oregon. Oregon played for the second straight week, not a great game. Now, last week against Maryland, they won by 21, so it didn't raise a lot of eyebrows. But the sloppiness, the inconsistencies, they have a couple of injuries. They have a bye week this week. Very well timed. This is a very, very well timed bye week for Dan Lanning and company because Tez Johnson at wide receiver, pretty clear the passing game needs him to be at, it's really to just be effective. In the 2 games without, they were good against Michigan. He missed most of that game, but in the last 2 games without him, it hasn't quite been there. And Oregon played 8 straight Big Ten games over the last 8 weeks, seemed to have caught up with them a little bit on Saturday night against Wisconsin. Still, the game didn't need to be as close as it was. Oregon made mistakes in several key instances that let Wisconsin hang around. Have I radically changed my opinion of Oregon? No, but I was definitely less impressed with Oregon's win than Texas's win. So if you were looking at Texas and saying, well, they only won 20-10, like, it's hard. It is hard to go on the road and beat a quality team. Wisconsin, Arkansas, I bet if you put those 2 teams on the field, it'd be a really fun, competitive football game. Arkansas would probably win. I don't know that for certain. If you play that game at Camp Randall, I don't know. Arkansas's offense had some comings and goings, as everybody else has throughout the year. There's this widespread expectation. This is why I'm bringing these 2 teams up in this particular segment before I talk about a couple other national title contenders who played well. There is no team that plays great and dominates every single week. Indiana, story of the year, 10-0. They've got game day this week in Columbus against Ohio State. It's the biggest game in the history of Indiana football. They were steamrolling everyone, right? Then they beat Michigan at home by 5. It's never easy every week. Washington last year, they were the national runners-up. They lost the national title game. It was hard every single week, it felt like. They were playing one-possession games against anybody and everybody. Against Oregon State, against Washington State. Time and time again, they found a way to win. There is value in that. If you stack up those performances over the course of the year, you have a BYU-Miami situation where I look at you and say, this is not sustainable. But the majority of Texas's games this year haven't looked like what it did against Arkansas. The majority of Oregon's games this year haven't looked like what it did against Wisconsin. You're not going to play the highest level of football where you beat the crap out of someone who you're capable of winning by a lot of points against, who you have a big point spread against going into the game. That can set a lot of people's expectations. That doesn't mean that that's the sole determining factor of how you should look at a particular matchup. So I think Texas was better than Oregon. Neither team looked like they were at their best, but they found a way to win, and there is value in that. And Texas has Kentucky this week. I hope they don't overlook Kentucky. Oregon has bye week, and, well, you can't lose to bye week. Can you beat bye week? You can have more good things happen during a bye week than bad. So Oregon, Texas, a little bit of shaky, but not overly worried about them. So then there are 2 national title contenders, in some people's view, that are at the other end of the spectrum. I apparently need to stop picking Navy to cover against good teams. Because Navy got beat pretty bad by Notre Dame a couple weeks ago. I thought they would do the same thing against Tulane that I thought they'd do against Notre Dame. Yeah, they didn't. Tulane got a big win. I'll talk about that more a little bit later on. But Notre Dame beats Virginia 35-14. Game wasn't actually that close. That was a backdoor cover. Line closed at 21.5. Vegas goated forever and always. But Virginia, not a great team, but not a terrible team. And your impression of Notre Dame, you probably haven't watched a lot of Notre Dame games. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched a lot of Notre Dame football compared to what I did early in the season when they were playing Texas A&M or when they lost to NIU. Yeah, watched a lot of those games. I bet a lot of you did too. But as the season progresses, they're starting to fall in the back of your mind. They're starting to fade into the background, onto the back burner mentally for people. But are you looking at how they're beating people? I was wondering earlier this year, and I said on this very show, Notre Dame playing this style of football offensively is not sustainable. They're not scoring enough points. Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard looks like there's a disconnect. Well, it looks a heck of a lot better now. They beat Virginia 35-14. They're putting up 40s and 50s. They have a 60-point game this year. Notre Dame is playing some really good football. Really good football. So you should keep an eye on the Irish there, because if they win the rest of their games, they'll be in the college football playoff. They won't have a conference championship. They'll probably be the number 6. They could be the number 5 seed. I'd imagine, given that there will be a loser in the Big Ten championship game, I imagine they'll probably be 6, but they could be 5. They'll be hosting a playoff game. but they still have to go to USC, and I don't think that game's going to be entirely easy to win. Lastly, of the national title contender bunch who either looked not so good or good, Ohio State is in the good camp. It wasn't always good. It was 7-0 Northwestern. 7-0 Northwest. Yeah, and then Ohio State said, all right, enough of this. Enough of this nonsense. The Wildcats are not ending our season here. And they win the game 31-7. So Ohio State has just the one loss going into this matchup with Indiana this week. I've got plenty of confidence in the Buckeyes. And by the way, I'm not some Indiana hater. I'm sure someone could find a way to dub me that because, well, you guys find a way to dub me whatever you feel like. And you know what? That's fine. That's the way that this particular game is played. I'm okay with it. But Ohio State feels like a team that continues to find its momentum more and more. And every time I look up, Jeremiah Smith is making a good play. And if they can run the ball, I like the Ohio State running game. I liked it more before the season than I have during the season. I think there's another gear. If they unlock that offense has got a crazy number of weapons, and they can be really good. But the defense, that's about what we thought it would be. That defense looks really good. They blocked a punt against Northwestern. That jump-started the whole game. Northwestern was up 7-0. You went, wait, it's the second quarter. Northwestern's up by a touchdown. Oh, no, never mind. Ohio State's got it. Defense can lock in like few in the country can. So the Buckeyes and the Irish, they look good. The Ducks and the Longhorns, they didn't look quite as good. But most importantly, they continued to win. I imagine the rankings will reflect that on Tuesday, and they very well should. There's going to be a Group 5 team in the playoff. Far be it from me to forget that was the case. I have been singing this tune since March, and here we are with a G5 playoff spot heating up. The race for it is just absolutely ablaze. It is molten lava. And guess what? It's still Boise State versus everyone, but everyone is on the march. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action and college football as well with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Do you think you know how these games are playing out every week? Do you have a feel for what the scores are going to be? Well, guess what? You can go put your money where your mouth is over at FanDuel.com. Join today. You'll get $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bets. Pretty sweet deal. FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And our official ticket sponsor here is Game Time at the Locked On Network, because Game Time has Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on everything you want to go to. Sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you want, they've got it. And you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So you know exactly what you're going to get once you arrive at the venue. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Do you know what time it is? I do. It's game time. So Boise State was losing. The Broncos were down 14-0, and San Jose State's got the ball inside the 5, 3rd and goal from the 3. Oh, they didn't get it. 3rd and 3 inside the 5, whatever it was. Here comes a 4th and 3. If you were beating a top 15 team in the country at home, it's your first year as a head coach, and you had a chance to go up 3 possessions, would you take that? Because I would have taken that. San Jose State had other ideas, and they decided to throw it to an offensive lineman. Now, this foolish play call aside, it became apparent to me as the game progressed why San Jose State made that call. They didn't feel like field goals were going to beat Boise State. I still would have played the possession game, even knowing how the game played out, because I think the tone and the tenor and the momentum changed in that particular moment, and the Broncos were able to capitalize. This was not an easy game, but it was a sicko game for those of you that pay attention to point spreads. Boise State trailed 14-0, and they covered 13.5 on the road. That's what the Broncos offense can do. And yeah, Ashton Jeanty is great. I continue to be impressed with the passing game because it does a lot of good things for this Boise State offense because, frankly, in the first half, Ashton Jeanty was bottled up. Ashton Jeanty wasn't doing a whole heck of a lot. But then Boise State started throwing the football a little bit. Maddox Madsen hit Camper a couple times, and the rest of the receiving core, and Dirk Cutter was dialing up. And then all of a sudden, San Jose State has to sit off a little bit, and then the lane's open for Jeanty. And this is the most important aspect of this Broncos offense, is their ability to just have a good enough passing game to make you think about it, to make you worry about it, to know that it can hurt you, and to also know that if they're down by a couple of possessions, they can come back in a game. They can score points in a hurry. They don't only have to run it with Jeanty. And then once they get up late in the game, they're just going to force feed number 2, and he's going to run out the clock. And he's going to rip a couple of explosive runs. So the Broncos win the game, and they are still on track. If they win the rest of their games, they will be the team that gets into the playoff as the Group of 5 champion. I feel really confident in saying that. But not as confident as I did last week. Because, look, I just have to point this out. Army is still unbeaten. Do you get that? Army is still an unbeaten football team. Pop quiz time. Who does Army play this week? Yes. Army plays, drumroll please, Notre Dame. Yes, the aforementioned on this show, national title hopeful Notre Dame. That's who Army plays this week. Now, Army has been ranked outside of the top 20. I imagine they'll stay there since they had a bye last week. They get to play Notre Dame off a bye. You make of that whatever you would like. But Army, if they were to pick up a win against a top 10 Notre Dame team, please tell me, what do you think that does to their ranking? How does the committee look at a Group of 5 team that has a 0 in the loss column while also having a victory over a top 10 team that, if they were in a power conference, would have the right to play for one of the 4 byes and is the best non-power 4 brand in the entire country? How would the committee view that? Boy, I think they'd view it pretty favorably. And so Boise State is ranked ahead of them. Remember the Broncos actually, after last week's rankings, despite winning, they got dropped. Broncos didn't lose a game, but they fell a spot. They fell a spot because there are a lot of SEC teams up there. And there are some Big 12 teams in the mix. And SMU is up there. And now Miami's in the fold in that 10 to 15 range. It's getting very crowded. I don't know what happens if Army beats Notre Dame. I don't even know if Army can beat Notre Dame. That's not why I'm bringing this up right now. The push to be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champion is as competitive this year as I can remember it being in the past. And perhaps things will sort themselves out. In college football, you know what? That tends to happen. I have a saying, help is often, almost always given. Look at that. I screwed up my own saying. That's how good I am at this. Help is almost always given to those who hold their own. If you do what you can, or if you control what you can control, and you just beat the team that is in front of you, a lot of times you're going to get assistance from elsewhere in this wild, crazy, wonderful sport that we call college football. So if Army keeps winning, if they go undefeated and they have a win against Notre Dame, that's an if. I want to reiterate that because that's going to be hard. Ask Navy how easy it is to beat Notre Dame as a service academy. They got blasted. If Army were to have a different fate, if Bryson Daly goes crazy and Notre Dame regresses back to their week 2 loss against NIU level of play, if that happens, can you say with 100% certainty that Army won't get the benefit of the doubt over Boise State? Because, yeah, the Broncos' lone loss will be on the road to number 1 Oregon by 3 points. And boy, that's as good of a loss as you can have in college football right now. But if Army can say, yeah, we played a top 10 team and won, and this wasn't a fluky BYU top 10 team. This was Notre Dame. And you can think whatever you want about that particular sentence. I'm just telling you how it will be viewed by many in the college football world. Do you think Boise State is still a lock at that point? You tell me. You tell me, but that's an interesting question. It's more than an interesting question. It's why Army Notre Dame is one of the biggest games of the college football weekend, especially if you are someone who partakes in the fandom of a Group of 5 football team, currently pushing for a college football playoff spot. Boise State's in that discussion. UNLV dominated San Diego State. They're still in that discussion. And how about Tulane? I thought Navy would hang around. Nope. Nope, they got blanked. John Sumrall is in his first season at Tulane, and I tell you what, he's doing a heck of a job. He is doing a heck of a job. Darian Mensah's playing good football. Defense pitches a shutout against that Navy offense. Spencer, it's just Navy. It's just the American. It's just this. I'm not disagreeing with you here. Last time I checked, Tulane is also in the American Conference, and I am not discussing whether the Group 5 champion can go and make a run in the college football playoff, because I don't particularly think that's likely. They can maybe win a game, but win 2 or 3, go to the national championship? No, I can't see that happening with any of these teams. But one of these schools is going to possess what a lot of schools in the SEC would like to have, but not everybody can get. And you're going to have a team like Miami or SMU perhaps that get left out of the playoff and look up and go, wait a minute, that team gets to go to the playoff? But if you listen to this show regularly, of course, that's not the case. You know very well, like, yeah, this is the system that we've come up with. We go with auto bids. And I am not opposed to teams in the Group of 5 having access to the playoff. I am opposed to auto bids across the board. I'm opposed to auto bids for the SEC champion. I'm opposed to auto bids for the Group 5 champion. I'm opposed to auto bids no matter what. I don't think they should exist in college football because not every conference is created equal. But you know what? I don't make the rules. I just abide by them. And by abide, I mean discuss them in the context of how they affect the sport. So that's just where we're at. But Tulane is playing really good football. They've got to take on Memphis. That's a good football team. But if they win, it'll be another feather in their cap. Memphis isn't ranked, but Memphis pretty consistently has been getting top 25 votes all season long. I think the committee would look at that victory and say, oh, that's pretty darn good. That's pretty darn solid. If they go win the American Conference, 2 losses is going to hurt them. 1 to Oklahoma, who's not very good, and 1 to Kansas State, who is good but not great. Those 2 games, yep, it's haunting Tulane right now. But if Army loses, hard to see the Knights getting an opportunity if they have that loss to Notre Dame. It's possible, but they'd probably square off with Tulane in the American Conference Championship game, and then that's what it would all come down to, that, or maybe even the Army-Navy game after the regular season comes to a close. It's so spicy. It's not quite as good as the Big 12 because there's an as deep of a lineup of teams. South Alabama took care of Louisiana. I'd mentioned them before, the Raging Cajuns. Yeah, they won't be the highest ranked Group of 5 conference champ because of the Jaguars, the former head coaching role that was filled by current Alabama defense coordinator Kane Womack. But those 4 teams, Boise State, Tulane, Army, UNLV, they're all alive. They're all alive for the 12-team playoff that gives a spot to the Group 5 champion. You think of it what you like, but it's going to happen. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.